Nia Carter had been cooking for the Choi household for 3 years before she knocked on Choi Sung-jae's office door at 7 in the morning and told the most dangerous man in Seoul exactly what his wife was planning to do with his life while he was gone. The marriage did not survive what followed. 4 months later, on the night the divorce was finalized, Sung-jae asked her to sit at his table for the first time in 3 years and told her she was the rarest thing he had encountered in 20 years of building an empire. Park Soo-yeon tried once more, a threat aimed at Nia's visa, at the life she had built in Seoul for her 3 children. It closed within a week, with no leverage left to hold. Then, in her own kitchen, Sung-jae told her he already knew what he felt and would not be changing his mind. Nia told him only that the distance between them had gotten considerably smaller than it used to be. She did not say how small. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, Parts 1 and 2 are everything you need. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Now let's get into Part 3. 3 months passed the way the good months always seem to pass. Quickly, without announcing themselves, measured only in retrospect by how much had quietly changed. Nia still cooked. She still rode the bus to Mapogu each evening, still checked Zara's homework and pressed David's uniform, and answered Emmanuel's questions about whatever had captured his imagination that particular week. But the household around her had reorganized itself so completely that even Mr. Kwon, who had spent 14 years managing the specific choreography of the Choi residence, had stopped pretending the arrangement was anything other than what it plainly was. Sung-jae came home for dinner every night now, not most nights. He had begun asking, without either of them naming what the question actually meant, whether Nia would consider bringing the children to the house on weekends, rather than her collecting them from school and returning immediately to Mapogu. Zara had started doing her homework at the kitchen island some Saturdays, arguing points of international law with a man who found her arguments more compelling than most of the briefings his own staff prepared him. David had appointed himself Sung-jae's unofficial advisor on which model airplanes were worth building and which were, in his considered 10-year-old opinion, a waste of good balsa wood. Emmanuel had simply attached himself the way small children attach themselves to people who make them feel important. Following Sung-jae through the garden, asking questions about everything from the koi in the pond to why grown men wore suits even on Saturdays. Mr. Kwon had taken to setting a 5th place at the weekend table without being asked, and then a 6th, and had mentioned to Nia once, with the specific dry understatement he reserved for observations he considered too obvious to require elaboration, that he had not ordered this much food for a household in over a decade, and did not intend to start apologizing for it now. He had also, Nia noticed, begun keeping a small stock of the specific snacks Emmanuel preferred in the pantry, unprompted, the particular quiet generosity of a man who had spent 14 years managing a household and had decided, somewhere along the way, that this one was worth managing with genuine warmth rather than mere competence. Nia watched all of it with the specific, quiet vigilance of a mother who had learned, across 7 years of doing this alone, to notice when something good was actually good and not merely convenient. She had spent those 7 years developing a particular instinct for the difference, for the specific texture of a kindness that would eventually reveal a cost attached to it, versus the rarer kind that simply continued being kind without ever presenting an invoice. She checked for the invoice. Every week, for 3 months, she checked. She never found one. It was good. She had stopped waiting for the other explanation. She told him on a Tuesday evening in March, the dishes cleared, the children already asleep in the guest rooms that had, without either adult formally deciding it, become simply their rooms. The evening had been ordinary in the way the best evenings often were. Dinner eaten slowly, Emmanuel's account of a science experiment gone slightly wrong at school, David's quiet satisfaction over a math test he'd nearly failed to mention because he considered it unremarkable. Zara's careful update on a debate club tournament she was, with visible effort, trying not to seem too excited about. Sung-jae had listened to all of it, with the same complete attention he gave everything, asking the specific follow-up questions that told each child he had actually been listening, rather than merely waiting for his turn to speak. And Nia had watched him do it, with the particular ache of a woman recognizing, in real time, exactly how much she had been missing, without knowing she was missing it. "I love you," she said. without preamble, because she had learned across a difficult life that the important things were said once, completely, and prefacing them with anything softer only delayed the moment rather than easing it. I have for a while now. I wanted you to hear it plainly, the way you have always given things to me plainly. Sung-jae went very still, the specific stillness Nia had come to recognize, across 9 months, as the register he reserved for the things that actually moved him, rather than the things that merely required his attention. Nia, he said. You don't need to say it back tonight, she said. I know you already told me you knew what you felt. I only needed you to hear that I had arrived at the same place, in my own time, the way I told you I needed to. I love you, he said. I have known it for months. I only waited because you asked me to wait, and I would have waited considerably longer than 9 months for the version of this that was actually yours to give, rather than mine to extract. She reached across the table and took his hand, and for a long moment neither of them said anything further, because some things, once said correctly, required only to be held rather than elaborated upon. Outside, somewhere in the house, she could hear the faint sound of Mr. Kwon locking the side door for the night, the ordinary machinery of a household continuing around a moment that felt, to the two people sitting at that table, anything but ordinary. Still here? Good, because what happens next is not a threat from outside this family. It's one that comes from inside his. Subscribe and hit the bell. Let's keep going. Choi Hye-sook had not visited her son's house in over a year. She was 71 years old, the widow of the man who had built the original fortune Sung-jae had spent 20 years transforming into something larger and more careful than his father had ever imagined. And she carried herself with the specific unbending posture of a woman who had spent her entire adult life understanding that the Choi name required a particular kind of maintenance. The right marriages, the right associations, the right careful distance from anything that might complicate the family's position, in circles that had taken 3 generations to secure. She had built her own considerable reputation before she had ever become a Choi, in the years when her own family's textile business had made her, briefly, one of the most sought-after young women in Seoul's business circles. She had married Sung-jae's father, not out of necessity, but out of calculation, understanding early that the combination of his ambition and her family's connections would produce something neither family could have built alone. She had spent 40 years proving that calculation correct, and she did not intend to watch it unravel now, in the twilight of her involvement, over what she privately considered a romantic impulse dressed up as a life decision. She had not attended the divorce proceedings, had offered no opinion when Park Soo-yeon left the house, had maintained the specific studied neutrality of a woman who considered her son's marriage his business, until the moment it became, in her calculation, the family's business instead. She had watched from a careful distance as reports reached her, through the specific channels that women of her generation and position maintained, the quiet network of household staff and business associates, and old friends who understood that information was its own kind of currency, describing a household that had reorganized itself around a cook, and she had told herself, for several months, that this was a phase that would resolve itself the way most of her son's earlier enthusiasms had resolved themselves. It had not resolved itself. It had, if anything, deepened. She called on a Thursday morning, requesting a visit that Thursday afternoon, and arrived precisely on time, dressed in the particular understated elegance that announced wealth more effectively than anything ostentatious could have. A dark wool coat, a single strand of pearls that had belonged to her own mother, the specific quiet confidence of a woman who had never once, in 71 years, needed to raise her voice to be heard. Nia was in the kitchen when Mr. Kwon came to tell her that Mrs. Choi, the elder Mrs. Choi, he specified, with a particular carefulness in his voice that told Nia everything about how seriously this visit was being treated, had requested to see her. Mr. Kwon's hands, Nia noted, were not quite steady as he delivered the message, a detail that told her more about the elder Mrs. Choi's reputation within this household than anything else could have. She found Hye-sook seated in the same formal sitting room where, months ago, Nia had once noticed a door closed between 9 and 10 each morning, for reasons that had turned out to matter enormously. "Miss Carter," Hye-sook said, not rising. "Please, sit." Nia sat, She did not perform deference she did not feel, but she understood the specific weight of the moment well enough to extend the courtesy the older woman's age and position warranted. "I understand my son has developed feelings for you," Hye-sook said, without preamble, the specific bluntness of a woman who had decided that softening the approach would only waste both their time. "I understand you have 3 children. I understand you were, until recently, employed as this household's cook." "All of that is accurate," Nia said. "Then you understand why I am here." "I have an idea," Nia said. "I would rather hear it from you directly than guess." Something flickered across Hye-sook's expression. Not quite surprise, closer to the specific recalibration of a woman encountering a directness she had not fully anticipated from someone in Nia's position. "My son has built something extraordinary," Hye-sook said. 20 years of careful positioning, marriages that mattered, associations that mattered, a name that opens doors his grandfather spent his entire life trying to pry open. I will not watch him dismantle that for a romantic notion, however genuinely felt, with a woman whose position in this household began in the kitchen. My position in this household began with me telling your son the truth about a wife who was planning to leave with half his fortune and the other half of his life's work," Nia said, steady. "I did not begin as a romantic notion. I began as the only person in this house who was willing to say something true, when everyone else's silence would have cost him considerably more than his marriage." Hye-sook studied her for a long moment. "You are not what I expected." "I don't know what you expected," Nia said. "I only know what I am. A widow, a mother of 3, a woman who has built a life out of very little, in a country that was not the one I was born in, through work rather than inheritance. If that is a disqualification in your eyes, I understand the position, even if I don't share it. We are right in the middle of something that could cost Nia the family she has only just begun to trust. Subscribe and stay close. You do not want to miss where this goes. Let's keep going." Hye-sook did not soften, but something in her posture shifted slightly. The specific recalibration of a woman recalculating an opponent she had initially underestimated. "There are practical matters you may not have considered," Hye-sook said. "The board of Choi Holdings includes men who remember my husband, who built relationships with families whose daughters were, at various points, considered suitable matches for Sung-jae. A marriage to his household's former cook, however genuinely felt, will be read by those men as instability. Instability affects confidence. Confidence affects capital. I am not simply protecting a name, Miss Carter. I am protecting the specific mechanism that keeps thousands of employees paid and a company my husband built from becoming vulnerable to exactly the kind of perception that predatory competitors look for." "That's a more honest argument than the one you started with," Nia said. "I respect it more, even though I don't think it changes my answer." "What is your answer?" "That I did not ask for any of this," Nia said. "I did not set out to fall in love with a man whose empire comes with the specific weight you're describing. But I am not going to end something honest, because it is inconvenient for a board of men who have never once had to build a life from nothing the way I have. Your son is capable of managing his own company's confidence. I trust him to do that. I would ask that you trust him too, instead of assuming the woman he chose is a liability, rather than an asset." "You believe you're an asset," Hye-sook said, something almost like amusement in it now. "I know I am," Nia said. "I have made myself indispensable to every household I have ever worked in, not through charm, but through being exactly what I appear to be. Your son told me once that this quality was the rarest thing he had encountered in 20 years. I don't think that assessment changes, because the relationship became a romantic one instead of a professional one. If anything, I would think it matters more now, not less." Hye-sook was quiet for a long moment, studying Nia with the specific unhurried attention of a woman accustomed to reading people for a living, in negotiations that had determined the fate of considerably larger sums than the ones currently under discussion. "You said you understand the position, even if you don't share it," Hye-sook said finally. "I want to understand something in return. What happens to your children if this fails? If the board's confidence erodes? If the company suffers? If my son's judgment becomes a public question because of decisions made in this sitting room today? What happens to Zara, and David, and Emmanuel, when the household they've grown accustomed to is suddenly less stable than the one you built for them alone in Mapogu?" The question landed with more weight than anything Hye-sook had said before it, and Nia felt it settle in a place the earlier arguments about bored confidence had not reached. "That is a fair question," Nia said, after a moment. "And I will answer it honestly, the same way I answer everything. My children have survived losing their father in a war neither of us chose. They have survived 12 years of building a life in a country that was not the one their mother was born in. They are not fragile, Mrs. Choi. And I did not raise them to depend on stability that could be taken away by a board's confidence or a mother-in-law's approval. If this fails, and I don't believe it will, but if it does, my children will do what they have always done. They will watch their mother stand up again, because that is the only inheritance I have ever had to give them, and it has served us better than any fortune could have." Something in Hye-sook's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Not agreement, not yet, but the specific recognition of a woman encountering, for the second time in one conversation, an answer she had not expected and could not easily dismiss. Sung-jae appeared in the doorway. Neither woman had heard him arrive. "Mother," he said, "I did not know you were here. We were having a conversation," Hye-sook said. "Your Miss Carter is considerably more formidable than you led me to believe." "I did not lead you to believe anything," Sung-jae said, crossing into the room, his voice carrying the specific edge Nia had heard only twice before, the night of the third phone and the meeting with Park Soo-yeon. "Because I did not know you intended to come here and interrogate the woman I love about her suitability for a life she has already proven, repeatedly, that she is more capable of navigating than most people born into it." "Sung-jae, I am not finished," he said, and Hye-sook, for the first time in the conversation, went quiet. "I understand the board's concerns. I understand the specific mechanics of confidence and capital you've spent your life protecting. I will manage those concerns the way I have managed every other complication in 20 years of building this company. What I will not do is treat the woman who told me the truth about my own house, at considerable risk to herself, with nothing to gain from it, as a liability to be weighed against a spreadsheet of board relationships." "I am not asking you to weigh her against a spreadsheet," Hye-sook said, some of her composure finally cracking. "I am asking you to consider that love, however genuine, does not always survive contact with the specific pressures your position will place on it. I watched your father's business nearly collapse twice, once from a competitor's aggression, once from a scandal that had nothing to do with competence and everything to do with perception. I am not trying to control your heart, Sung-jae. I am trying to make certain you understand exactly what you are choosing to carry, so that when the pressure comes, and it will come, you are not surprised by its weight." Sung-jae was quiet for a moment, something in his expression softening slightly at the specific vulnerability underneath his mother's argument, the first genuine crack Nia had seen in her composure since she'd arrived. "I understand the weight," he said. "I have understood it since the night she came to my office at 7 in the morning and told me something true that cost her everything to say and nothing to gain from saying it. I am not choosing her because I am naive about what it will cost. I am choosing her because I have already calculated the cost, and I have decided it is worth carrying." The room was very quiet. "You've made your decision," Hye-sook said finally. "I made it months ago," Sung-jae said. "I am only now saying it out loud. To you, because I did not think it required your permission, and I still don't. But I would prefer, if it's possible, that you arrive at your own peace with it rather than remaining an obstacle to something that is already decided." The recap you already know says Nia does the right thing even when it costs her. Tonight, it's about to cost his mother's blessing, and neither of them are backing down. Subscribe and hit the bell. Part 4 is already forming. Let's keep going. Hye-sook left without further argument, though not, Nia understood, because she had been persuaded. Women like Hye-sook did not concede in a single afternoon what had taken decades to construct. She had simply recognized, with the specific precision of someone who understood leverage better than almost anyone in the room, that the argument was not winnable that day, and that continuing to press it would only harden a position that might, given time, soften on its own. "I'm sorry," Sung-jae said, after the car had pulled away from the front of the house. "Don't be," Nia said. "I have handled difficult mothers-in-law before, metaphorically speaking. I have handled landlords and school administrators, and a woman who tried to have me deported through a fabricated visa complaint. Your mother is formidable, but she is not the most formidable person I've faced this year. Something almost like a laugh escaped him. Brief, surprised, the specific sound of a man who had spent the entire afternoon braced for a fight and had not expected to end it feeling lighter rather than heavier. She will not simply accept this, he said. I want you to understand that clearly. She will look for other angles. The board, the company, anything that gives her leverage to slow this down, if not stop it. I understand that, Nia said. I am not asking for an easy path. I have never had one. I am only asking that whatever comes, we face it the way we've faced everything else, together, and honestly, without either of us managing the other out of the difficult parts. Agreed, he said. They stood together in the doorway for a moment, watching the empty driveway where Hye-sook's car had been. The specific quiet of a house absorbing the aftermath of a confrontation neither of them had asked for, but both had, in their own way, been braced for since the relationship began. Your mother asked me a question that stayed with me, Nia said finally, about what happens to my children if this fails. I gave her an honest answer, but I want to give you a more complete one, because you deserve to hear the whole of it, not just the part I offered her. Tell me, Sung-jae said. I am not afraid of this failing, Nia said. I have built my entire life around the specific discipline of preparing for difficulty without letting the preparation curdle into fear. What I am afraid of, if I am honest, is that my children will come to depend on a stability I cannot fully guarantee, that they will grow accustomed to this house, this garden, this version of Saturday mornings, and that if it is ever taken from them, the loss will cut deeper than anything they've already survived, precisely because it was good. Sung-jae was quiet for a long moment. Then let me offer you the only guarantee that is actually mine to give, he said. Not stability in the sense of money or position. Those things can shift, and I would be lying to promise otherwise. But my presence, my attention, the specific quality of showing up, consistently, regardless of what the board or my mother or anyone else decides to make difficult. That is the only guarantee that has ever mattered to me, coming from anyone in my own life, and it is the only one I know how to actually keep. That's enough, Nia said quietly. That has always been enough. My grandmother used to say that the people who promise you everything are usually the ones who deliver the least of it, and the ones who promise only what they can actually keep are the ones worth building a life around. She would have liked you, I think, though she would never have said so directly. She wasn't a woman who handed out approval easily. I would have liked the chance to earn it, Sung-jae said. You're earning it now, Nia said. Every night you come home instead of finding a reason to stay late. Every Saturday you spend explaining tide charts to a 10-year-old who asks the same questions 3 different ways just to keep the conversation going. That's the currency she would have recognized. Not money, presence. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Sung-jae found Nia in the kitchen one more time. The same kitchen where 9 months ago he had first begun asking her to sit after dinner. The same kitchen where, 3 months ago, she had told him she was closer to certain than she had been in 7 years. He did not sit across from her this time. He knelt. Nia went very still. I am not going to make this a performance, he said. You do not want performances, and I have learned, across 9 months, that everything true between us has been said plainly, without theater. So I will say this plainly. I want to marry you. Not because my mother needs to see it resolved, not because the board needs the reassurance of a formal arrangement, but because I have spent 20 years building a life that impressed everyone except myself, and you are the first thing in it that I actually want to wake up to every single morning. Nia looked at him for a long moment, the kitchen quiet around them, the specific stillness of a moment she understood she would remember in precise detail for the rest of her life. The particular light over the stove, the faint smell of the evening's dinner still lingering in the air, the sound of the house settling around them the way houses do late at night, as if it too understood something significant was happening within it. Ask me properly, she said, not the whole speech, just the question. Nia Carter, he said, will you marry me? Yes, she said, and meant it with the particular completeness of a woman who had waited 7 years to trust anything this much again, and had finally found something worth the wait. That is where part 3 ends. Hye-sook has not conceded. She has only retreated to find better ground. The board is still an unknown variable. And somewhere in Mapogu, 3 children are about to learn that their family is changing in a way none of them fully expected yet. Though Nia suspected, watching Zara's careful, deliberate silences over the past few weeks, that her 16-year-old daughter had already guessed more than she'd let on. Part 4 is coming. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments, do you think Hye-sook comes back with the board, or does she find a different way to fight this? I read every single one. Don't go anywhere.